In this podcast episode, I'll be talking to Crystal McGregor, who's the general manager at Tech Ready Women. Crystal is a successful founder herself. She's raised capital for her own company, and she now works with women-led businesses through a range of programs at Tech Ready Women, including their Investment Ready program, which runs nationally, helping founders to scale through external funding. So, Crystal, it's really great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here and sharing your tips and tricks. I want to start by asking you just to give a general overview of what's funding like in Australia at the minute, particularly for women-led businesses, but more broadly, what's the climate like? Is it easy to get money out of investors or not?
I don't think it's ever easy to get money out of investors. I mean, I don't think I need to share the stats. We all know how difficult it is to raise capital as a female founder. We get such a small percentage of, the VC funding that goes out to founders in Australia. It's sitting around 1.5 to 2%. So always difficult, particularly difficult for women.
Yeah. Let's unpack that, because I think 1.5% is a shocking figure. Why is that? So maybe this is something that I think there's probably not a lot of nuance in terms of people understanding some of the barriers. Do you just want to talk about what some of those barriers are and what can be done to overcome them?
Yeah, we did some research at Tech Ready Women to identify why the founders certainly thought that they weren't getting access to the funding. And when we asked, why you're not getting VC funding, the founders were being told that they're too early. We took a look at a lot of the businesses, and they were probably right in terms of women come up with an idea, they invest in building an MVP, but to get funding to then, build out the solution, to get all of that traction. So there's probably, for me, a missing piece before we get to the VC stage. That is a gap for women to be able to access capital, to be able to get to the stage that if they then want to go through the VC route, that they can. And again, there's lots of conversations around VC is a very particular framework in terms of you get VC and then you're constantly raising to be able to hit the projections that the VCs want. So it's a very different, business model to a lot of the business models that women see themselves in.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that early funding piece, because I think that is really crucial. And I think there's some fundamental challenges in terms of the kind of funding climate, as you've alluded to. But there's also, I think, probably not a lot of good information out there in terms of what early stage investors are looking for, whether we're talking about angel groups or friends and family or whatever. Yep. Most of the female founders that we work with at Startup Onramp are early stage. They're maybe building an MVP or maybe just launched something. And there's often some really good discussion going on about, well, how do I fund this? And can I get investors to fund the development of my product so that we can then launch it and build a successful business? So maybe we should talk about what are those thresholds for different types of investors?
Look, I think certainly that really early stage. So we're talking about we've got an idea, we've put it into an MVP. We may have our first customers, we may not. And I use the analogy that imagine if we've got a bucket and we really need to fill this capital bucket with all the things we possibly can. Right. So it's not just I've got an idea, I'm going to go out and get a VC or an investor to fund that idea and take it to market. It's what can we chuck in the capital bucket to get ourselves to a point where we can either choose VC or not. So things that I'm talking about are actually getting revenue. Revenue from customers is the best way that you can fill your capital bucket in terms of reinvesting that in building the technology. And that could be, customers paying for that early product. It could be pilot customers. It could be prepaying for future things. It could be crowdfunding, it could be grants. So, certainly the Queensland Government has a whole bunch of grants available for founders to be able to access. So how do we leverage all of that against each other to get us through? Like you said, there's also the family, friends and fools. Is who can we get on the train to put some capital in, or expertise, or connections into market, or services. Sweat equity goes a long way in terms of getting us through that early period.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's when you talk about those various things that can go into this capital bucket, I think people often default to a view that says, I'm going to raise money from source A, whatever A is, investor or a grant or whatever. But what you're describing sounds more like a sales funnel. Like it's saying, hey, we've got a pipeline of opportunities and we've got to put a bunch of them into the top of the funnel and then, try and work their way through. Would that be fair?
Yeah, 100%. And also think about the potential of that sales funnel as well. So if you were to write down, here are all the options for capital, what's the likelihood of success of getting VC funding when you're super early? So you could put like 12 to 18 months effort. You could be pitching your little heart out, develop all the things that VCs want you to develop. And the likelihood of getting that VC funding could be still quite low.
Yeah.
Whereas you could say, all right, what if I put the same amount of effort into getting a corporate pilot, or the same amount of effort into getting my first 100 paying customers, even though the technology product might not be ready yet? And so think about that sales funnel in that exact way, the likelihood of securing it, and what's the return on investment for my time, money, and energy as a founder, which is so critical right now, to get that return.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I remember when I was on the investor side of the table, helping to run a little seed fund, we looked at the numbers, and we were a small fund, but we received maybe 1,000, 1,500 opportunities over a couple of year period, and a lot of angel groups and VC funds get many times more than that, and they'll only make a handful of investments.
Mm-hmm.
So the odds. They see a lot of things that were never investable, and we should probably talk about what some of those red flags are. But even if you said, look, we've got 500 credible opportunities to look at every year, most funds and most angel groups are only investing in maybe 10 of them max in a year. So like the odds are, it's low percentage tennis. So I think you've got to look at other opportunities, haven't you?
Yeah. And to think, if I could have the same level of input into getting customers over the line, and they're going to be customers for a long time, and also forge the development of prioritizing the features and functions and the things that we're going to do within the technology. So a much better return on investment, as far as I can see. And if you do end up securing all of those customers, well, then that's the traction that investors will be interested in.
Yeah, for sure. So if you look at the founders that you've worked with and advised at this stage of, let's get some early customers, let's get some revenue and some traction, what have you seen has worked well in terms of overcoming that kind of static friction, the cold start problem where you say, hey, I've got an MVP, or I've got version 1 of our product. I find a lot of founders struggle with this idea of saying, hey, I'm going to try and take money from someone. I'm going to sell it to, whether it's an enterprise customer or a pilot or whatever, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
They really struggle with the idea of saying, hey, look, it's not really perfect yet. I'd much rather, wait until it's really, really good, and then we can. How do they deal with that?
Yeah. It'll be ready next week. It'll be ready next month. We hear it so much. And that's the hard bit, because you can see this founder and they're working double time and they're investing their own time and money and effort into building out when it's ready, when it's ready, when it's ready. And I mean, I'm always of the thought is go and sell it to a stranger for $1. Sell something to a stranger for $1. And then that stranger is going to be on the train to help you work out how to do the next, how to solve that problem for that customer in a different way and in a different way. I think sometimes as founders, we have our heads set on, we need this beautiful scalable solution, when in reality, we need to just start talking to people and start solving their problems, so much so that they're going to put their hand in their pocket, pull out their credit card and pay you for that solution. Then you're on to something.
Yeah, for sure. And I know if you talk to most early stage investors, certainly in Australia, one of the first questions that they ask is, have you got customers? Have you got revenue? What does it look like? Show me the growth rate, show me the feedback, the traction. What's your advice to founders who are getting ready to raise capital in terms of what are those kind of minimum thresholds that they should be hitting to be able to have a discussion with an investor to say, hey, we're looking like an investable business?
That's interesting. It can be different across different verticals. Obviously, when you've got like health tech and med tech, that they often definitely need to be pre-revenue before they start getting investors. So yeah, different verticals, different stories. And it feels like it's never enough. So if you go and you say, I've got 100, paying customers, the investors are going to say, well, come back when you've got 1,000. So I think
Sure.
I think month-on-month growth is important. And whether that's users or customers, that every month people are coming back, and you can start to measure, how are we acquiring them? What are the best channels? What is the secret thing that's working? Also, what is the churn? Like, who is dropping off? Why are they dropping off? Who's sticky? Who is still in the platform as was the last month and the month before that? So if we can really see those numbers growing month on month, I think that's more important than the actual numbers, which is going to be different across every solution.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you talk to a lot of investors, they'll say to you in one way or another that what they're looking for is a lever. So they want to, in any company that they consider investing in, they're looking at it and saying, well, is there a lever that you've proven that if we pull it really, really hard, it translates into more growth and more revenue and, someday profitability and all those good things.
Yeah.
A lot of founders don't have that lever. Like they say, hey, we've tried some Facebook ads, or we've tried, whatever their kind of go-to-market strategy is. And you can kind of tell, you've probably seen these pitch decks where there's a slide that says, customer acquisition or something is the title, and it's got like 10 bullet points, which usually means we're going to try a bunch of stuff, but we haven't yet worked out which lever to pull. And investors look at that. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, but I think investors look at that and go, well, okay, we'll come back when you've figured out which lever you should pull.
Yeah, I think founders are in the research and development phase. And investors aren't looking so much to invest in that. You're still mucking around trying to work it out. But they're at the point where, you've worked it out, now let's put fuel on the fire. So I think founders should be okay to be in that research and development phase for a little bit longer, and not just go, hey, this is the best idea on earth. I'm going to build this great solution and someone's going to come and invest in it. It's like, keep mucking around in that research and development phase for your own sake. Like, put your hat on as the founder. You're investing all of your time and effort into this solution. Go through that research and development phase, find out what's going to work before you're even going to continue investing all of your time into it. And then once you see things starting to work, then you can look for that external capital.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Let's talk about the different types of investors, because I know that you've helped founders to raise money from angel groups and VCs and also equity crowdfunding platforms. Do you just want to talk a little bit about, like, what are the different categories of investor, and how should people think about, do I raise money from this category or this category, and what's worked and what hasn't?
Yeah, I think every scenario is different for every founder, the business that they're working in, their level of risk. So I think the first to look at is obviously from customers, pilots, whatever. But then moving into outside capital, so family and friends. And I think even you probably said to me, Crystal, go and find some family and friends raise when we were raising. And it was like, who do I know that's going to have cash to put into this idea? And I think just even having those conversations with people that people in your network, people who have expertise in the industry that you're solving for, are the people you should be talking to. So I think it's a much easier in that early stage to say, hey, do you have some money? Are you jumping on the train? Really need those early stage sort of supporters at this stage, and that can be cash investments, it can be sweat equity investments, whatever that might look like. So I think that's the first place to start, and then you can also practice pitching and listen to what friendly investors are going to ask you in terms of the questions. How deep do they go into the data room? What are they looking at in terms of evaluation? How solid do you have to have your financial forecasts? So that will give you sort of an entry into then start talking to angel investors. So they can be individual angel investors, or they can be syndicates like your Brisbane Angels or your Scale Angels or your Sydney Angels, Aussie Angels. So there's a whole heap of syndicate groups out there, and it's worth having a look at those as well. Even if you are a little bit earlier, is to see what criteria are they looking at? What are the types of companies that they're investing investing in? Do I fit the same sort of level in terms of traction that I've had? Do I fit in the same industry vertical? And so start to do your research around those angel investor syndicates and having conversations with individual angels as well. I think that's particularly if they're great in an area, like an industry area, the same as you, or a lot of exited founders as well. So we've got a bunch of women who have exited their businesses now come back as angel investors within our Tech Ready Women community. And I think that's a great first step in terms of having those conversations.
Yeah, that's really good advice. What are your suggestions for how to approach potential investors? Because it's all easy to say, hey, you should go find some investors. I see, if we come back to this question of, what are the myths or the things that people struggle with where they maybe don't need to, one of them seems to be that they go, oh, I'm not ready to raise money. I haven't got like a really good pitch deck, or, there's some things we haven't worked out or whatever, so I'm not going to do that. But what's your advice? Like, should they start when they're not ready, or should they wait till it's a really solid story?
Definitely start when you're not ready, but you should definitely have a pitch deck. I think you should be able to articulate your business really clearly in terms of the problem, the customer, the solution, the business model and financials. Like I've had angel investors come to me and say, Crystal, there's people who are pitching saying that they're going to get 1% of the TAM and that's their financial forecast. And I'm like, I will never send you anyone who does that. So
1%. Why not 10%? Why not 0%?
So I think just you really do need that solid, if you are looking at raising, just start building together. It does not need to be perfect, but you need to start having those fundamental things. So when you do have conversations with investors, you have some idea what you're talking about in terms of valuation and things like that. I think one of the myths like that, you turn up to a pitch event, you pitch your little heart out, an investor comes up and says, love your product, I want to invest, here's $100,000 or whatever it might be. It doesn't often happen. I think it's about building relationships with investors. It's about talking about your traction. And so I always say to our founders, do an investor update. If you're actively raising, I would do a monthly investor update. I would talk about, here's the problem we're solving. Here's where we're going to get to by the end of next month. Here's where we got to from the start of last month. Here's where we need help. I think investors will often help, and that sort of puts them on the train where they're interested in seeing you succeed. And when you do start to succeed, they've built that relationship with you. So it's a two-way street. You need to do due diligence on the investor as well as them do due diligence on you. And that's much easier to do when you've formed that relationship over a period of time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was actually talking to Georgia Barkell from Sprint Ventures about this a little while back, and her advice was, as an investor, she'd much rather make connections with founders before they're ready. And it's not the founder coming in saying, "Hey, I want to pitch for funding today." It's them saying, "I want you to be on our investor update." It's this is what we're doing. Do you have any advice? Like you've invested in. It's not the general, can I pick your brains over a coffee kind of question. It's a specific one that says, hey, you've invested in company A. They've done some things that we're going to have to figure out how to do. Can you help connect me with that founder, for example?
Yes.
But I think most investors really like to have that kind of early connection. And to me, it kind of, it's helping the investor to see that trajectory that you're on. Because if they look at you at a point in time and go, oh, right, they've shown up in our meeting room with a pitch deck, you just get a snapshot at one point in time. But if you have touch points over, maybe several months, they can kind of get a feel for the trajectory that you're on. Yeah.
And especially that, like in the lead up. So I don't open your raise and say, we've got an open raise right now. Oh, hi, I'm Crystal. It's like I would lead up for 12 months before I'm opening the raise and start to get that excitement and then say, we're opening the raise in 6 months' time. Can I put you on the investor update and continue to have those conversations? And again, use it like your CRM, your pipeline, your conversations, your relationship building, understand who they are, what the investment thesis is, like what's the industry vertical, what's the stage, what type of companies that they're investing in. Do they even have cash to deploy? So there's a lot of investors out there who don't have buckets of money ready to deploy, which is wasting your time and their time if that's not going to be in the time frame that you need that capital.
Yeah. How long does it take to raise capital? If you said the start point is when you first have a conversation with a potential investor to the time where, money goes into the bank account.
You tell me, Colin.
It's a lot longer than people think it is.
It is, and it's a piece of string, because obviously there are founders out there who are building in public who people know, and if they say I'm opening a raise next month, then they could already have people ready to go. But if you're starting from absolute scratch and you've never taken investment before, you are looking at 12 to 18 months.
Yeah. I was talking to Brian Cook from Brisbane Angels recently about this, and his advice was that you need to budget at least 6 months of elapsed time. And yeah, for sure, there are some that go 12, 18, and not very many that are a lot shorter than 6 months.
Yeah, that's right. And especially if you're looking over Christmas, I think, nothing
happens at Christmas.
Yeah, start of November to the end of January, there's not a heap happening. So you need to consider that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Can we go back to the question of obstacles for female founders? I think there's still some challenges there in terms of the investment community. If you look at the makeup of a lot of angel groups, this is improving, I suspect, but there's still a lot of bias out there. There's a lot of middle-aged male investors that make up a chunk of the investment community. Have you got any advice for women founders who are maybe not connected to the investment scene to kind of overcome bias or other kind of obstacles that are maybe not faced by their male counterparts?
I think a lot of the time that women are solving problems that men don't have a direct relationship with. So I know, I was pitching fashion tech, and I think a lot of women are pitching women-based problems. So to be able to overcome the understanding of the people in the room to say this is a problem, and to be able to demonstrate that problem really solidly. And I always use the line, if you don't believe me, go home and ask your wives and daughters. So I think that's one side of it. I think another thing with women is, and I'm generalizing here, is that standing up in front of rooms full of people and talking about your solution with confidence and with conviction can sometimes be difficult, because we may not be natural public speakers. We may be builders who are great sitting behind the computer building things and talking directly to our customers, but that standing in front of a big audience and talking about a thing that we're so passionate about can really have an effect on the conviction that we pitch with. And so to overcome that, I think it's a lot of really understanding every part of your business, and really matching the passion with the understanding of the facts and figures, the numbers, the traction, the financial forecasting. It's really important that we're able to stand and speak to that part of the business with confidence, because if we're out there pitching and it's like we're feeling a bit nervous, and then we start talking about financials and we're not quite sure, you really have to do a lot of work to yourself to be able to create that persona of, I'm here telling you about a business opportunity that I am so passionate about, but I'm very knowledgeable across every part of this business, and pitch that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of founders struggle with the financials, and investors generally, they want to know what your product is, and they want to see that, customers want it. And that's sort of as far as they go on product. They're more interested in, revenues and, what are the underlying assumptions behind your financial model. One of the myths seems to be that, you need to have a 3-year or a 5-year forecast, and investors will kind of hold you to it. In my experience, they're mostly not. They know that if you're an early stage company, projecting revenues even 12 months into the future is just crystal ball gazing, right? So they kind of take that with a grain of salt, but it's more about saying, have you really thought about the underlying assumptions, and can you support them with some logic or some data or something? Would that be fair?
Yeah, I had a conversation with an investor, and it was a very candid conversation. And I said, the hockey stick like, I made it up, right? And they
Mm,
were smiling and started laughing at me. And they're like, Crystal, yes, we know.
mm,
But what we want to see that every assumption that you've made for that hockey stick could in fact be true. And so if you can
mm.
talk to each number and your financial forecast is really just a thread of story across your whole business just in numbers. So if you're saying I can hit this much revenue because I've got this many customers, do I have the channels to market to be able to access that? Have I factored in the cost of the customer acquisition? Do I have the human resources to be able to onboard all of those people? Have I thought about what the technology solution looks like? Are there different pricing points? So it's each piece of that just in a numbers story, and it's about you understanding which part of that story. And when investors hear that, do they also know that to be true? Whether that's market demands, whether that's other models, whether that's other businesses that they've invested in that have similar, sales strategies. So investors are just going, does that story sound kind of true to me? Yeah, okay. Just we make it look like a hockey stick.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Classic hockey stick. Love it. What goes wrong? If you look at all of the founders that you've worked with, helping them to get ready to raise money and, due diligence materials and pitch decks and all of the things that they have to do, what do they struggle with most? Like what trips them up?
So many things go wrong. I mean, look, and sadly to say, a lot of times it's feeling like the tech's not ready. And we're just saying, like, take money to solve problems for people, because there's always going to be technical aspects that aren't going to work. Even the best technology. I mean, you and I jumped into Riverside and there was a bug, right? So even the best technology has bugs.
Yep.
And it's like we have to get through that and still be taking money from our customers and solving a problem for them. I think a lot of times there's co-founder issues and there's like team issues, as in a few of us went into business together and this person's not pulling their weight. And so the impact of that, to be able to sort out that leadership, that governance structure, you can't go and capital raise when you're trying to kick a co-founder out and you're paying them out, and there's all those governance issues as well. So that's a big one that we see a lot of the time. So really setting up that co-founder structure, those early stage advisors is really important. I think there's obviously the financial forecasting. I think there's so many things, even to the point of pitching. Is like you can be prepared, your pitch deck can be prepared, and then you just like flunk it on the day. Like I've seen founders who is like they've got talking into a microphone, then they're not used to talking into a microphone, and then using a clicker, and they're like, Crystal, I've got notes as well.
Right.
Which hand do I hold the notes in?
Sure.
So many things can go wrong. I think for me, it's like the more you practice, the more you talk about your business, the more you get support from advisors and from programs, like whether it's Startup Onramp or Tech Ready Women, that you can do that practicing in a safe space before you're out in the wild talking to real investors, pitching to angel investors or whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I think that's really, really sensible advice. I always use the pitchback test, where if I'm talking to a founder, whether they're raising money or not, like just if they're trying to explain what their business is all about or what their product does, I always try and do the pitch back to say, well, could I now pitch it back to you in my own words? And often I find myself going, you know what, I don't think I could explain what your company does yet.
And it's so hard when you're a founder and you're so deep into this solution and you know so much about everything. You just want to hand all of that information over to someone to get them excited about it. But it does the opposite. They start glazing over. It's like, I want to get away from this person. This is starting to get boring, and I'm not having the chance to input and ask the question of the bit that I'm really interested in. So for founders to be able to do that elevator pitch so succinctly that you or I can go and elevator pitch them anywhere is such an important skill that they need to build.
Yeah. Have you got any tips for getting that really solid? Like what works for people in terms of like creating and then polishing that elevator pitch?
I think structure. So I always like problem, customer, solution, excite me, give me an ask and a call to action. So if you can really use that structure rather than oh, I'm Crystal, I'm building this solution, it's got these features and functions, blah, 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 blah. It hasn't given you the chance to come on that journey with me. Whereas
Yeah.
if I can talk about the problem and then Colin starts nodding, oh yeah, I know that to be a problem. And I start talking about the customers that I'm solving for. He's like, oh, that's actually me. He starts nodding more. And so
Yeah.
here's my solution. It's as simple as these three things. I'm not going to give you all the features and functions. I'm just going to give you, here's the change that it's going to make just for you, Colin. And you're
Yeah.
nodding away. And then I'm like, oh, so really exciting news. You start to get excited with me. And then I'm like, actually, I've got an ask for you. Can you do this? And here's how you can do it. So I think if you can get that structure so tight, and it literally just needs to be a couple of sentences. It doesn't need to be me talking for 5 minutes and you sitting there going, I've got a question. No, I've forgotten now. I want to get away from you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you were to do like sales coaching or like, do a course on how to do sales, that's one of the things they're going to tell you, right? And you're going to say, you ask a question and then, zip it, and let the customer do some talking. So it's kind of the same approach, isn't it, with investors?
Yeah, 100%. And even with those customers as well, like with those, if you're going into a sales call, which I like to call a discovery meeting, where you just asking the person about their problem, and then they hand over every problem that they've got, and then it's almost like they give you the right to be able to solve it back to them. So I think really having that structure is important, and practicing it. Like you can be a solo founder or a co-founder and you're sitting there for days, months on end, just talking about the solution between yourselves. And the minute you start telling it to someone else, they're like, no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So practice it with fresh people.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen that so many times.
For me, one of the most important things for founders is that they are the center of the business at this early stage. And so if you have run yourself ragged, like you wake up in the middle of the night, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're not exercising, you're not spending time with your family, you're just 100% focused on bringing this solution to life, that is the biggest risk that for any startup, is that a founder that's not doing this in balance with the rest of their life. We've worked with founders who have spent every last dollar on building tech solutions and not doing the simple things in life. So for me, and my first question to any founder is, how are you feeling today? What's going on? What's keeping you up at night? And we unpack that first before we're unpacking what's happening in the business and whether we're worried about getting customers today or whether we're worried about talking about investment. I think the process of going through investment and trying to raise money because you've spent all your own money or you've invested all of your time, money and effort into building the solution is that we need to go back to the founder to start with and make sure that they're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. I've seen lots of founders struggle because they haven't prioritized that balance. And it's not easy to get right, but it's super important for sure.
Yeah. I mean, even me in my general life, like it's easy, and I teach it, look after yourself first, make sure you're getting exercise. It's like, for me to integrate that into my day, it's hard. It's really hard. And just the realization that my needs as a human are far more important than my job, than my business, than, anything that's going on with customers.
Yeah. And I think good investors understand that, not just from there's the hard-nosed kind of perspective that says, if I invest in this company, it's more risky if the founders aren't looking after themselves because, they will hit a brick wall and things will start to fall apart. I guess there's also good investors, good investors that, the kinds of people that, yes, they want to make money by investing in your company, but they're actually, I guess like you said before, there are a lot of founders that have been in their own businesses and they know what the grind is like, and they've got to a point where they've been able to exit and and get some cash that they can reinvest. But in my experience, at least, the good investors, the ones that you would really, really want in your company, are the ones that really actually want you to succeed as a person, not just, it's not just a transaction.
Yeah. And I think that's part of that due diligence when you're talking to investors and you're looking at the different companies that they've invested in, and even having a chat to those companies and just say, what's the relationship like? What's the communication like? How supportive are these investors in terms of you as the founder and the journey? Or are they just looking for their 10x, 100x returns? Yeah.
Yep. I'd like to ask you for any last bits of practical advice? So if you were talking to a founder who's at an early stage and thinking about, maybe in the next 12 months, getting ready to raise a funding round, what are some things that you'd advise them to start putting some time and effort into?
I think pulling together the data room, like pulling together, here are all the bits and pieces that investors are going to want to see. Don't do that after you've done your pitch and all of a sudden you've got a list of 100 things and you need to tick it off, because that is just going to put you behind right from the very get-go. I think get as many customer traction points as you can, be able to go out and clearly articulate your business. And then, I guess start looking at all of the different types of capital strategies and where you best fit in terms of your time. And of course, access the support of mentors, of people who have done it before you. The programs that we run aren't just because like we like running programs, it's because here's everything we wish we knew before we started this process. So don't make the same mistakes as us and get on the front foot before you even go out.